Hello again, welcome back to the RP-0 America career here. So I had to do a bit of interesting tweaking in the background. So there's multiple versions of a number of the engines I'm interested in. So the next thing I want to build is Thor and then Thor Able, which is the next set of rockets which allowed America to send a probe out of the influence of the Earth, I suppose, towards the moon or out into the interstellar, interplanetary space. So I had to do a little bit of fixing with that. It was part of my RP-0 fun slash work. So I've also set up to, I don't recall offhand if I set this up in the last video, but the tracking station is currently upgrading because to be able to set up maneuver nodes, so to go from Earth orbit to the moon, I need to be able to see patched conics. So that's what this unlock is going to do. So it's 63 days. Currently we are in May, according to this, I threw it into Google, May 23rd of 1953. So we're definitely ahead of our program, considering, ahead of history, considering we have put something into orbit. But we're pretty much out of funds. So we've got 77,000. To launch anything larger than 40 tons, we need to invest 75,000, which would make us pretty much broke. We'd be able to build a rocket, do a couple sounding rocket contracts, but pretty much, let's see, like beyond airplane contracts, which I'm certainly not going to be pursuing, because there's a lot of money there. But I've literally never built a plane successfully, so I'm not going to bother trying that. And like launching and landing planes take quite a bit of time, so I personally wouldn't find it very interesting in a video series. So what do we have remaining to us? So this would give us a bit of cash, although it's kind of a buggy type of contract. I'll have to check into it to just see if I could trigger like a science instrument on like my explorers, say, or just put up something new to acquire that, because that's a good chunk of change, about $6,000. Yeah, between $5,000 and $6,000. So standing rocket medium, I should be able to accomplish quite easily. The downside is it only gives you $1,100. I kind of think in like thousands now, really, because to unlock that is going to require 75,000. So that's 75 units of cash in my brain. So this barely gives me 1 unit of cash. This gives me 2 to 3, but that's not all profit. I looked and say using my explorer to accomplish this contract would cost me most of this. So if I, let's say, built my Redstone Explorer to accomplish both of these, I'd make 1 to 2,000. So I'd effectively have to farm those like 30 times to get any cash. So can I do any of these other things? So this successful re-entry requires you pretty much get to orbital velocity and then survive a return. It gives you a ton of cash. It's definitely a big first, but without a heat shield, I can't really do that. So I'll do a little research. I could potentially wait until I have the tech for this, but I have to invest a pretty good amount of money in the hardware for that. So I think it would be not quite zero sum, but this would pay for the hardware to unlock the contract and not leave me much profit for what I need to do. So if I can only build to 40 tons, I can't do anything crude yet, of course. I can't shoot anything at the moon for under 40 tons. Unfortunately. So like the Thor first stage itself is like 50 tons, and it's not light by any means, stretch of the imagination, but it's light compared to, say, Soviet hardware, and it's light compared to our later hardware as well. So we can't really do anything in relation to the moon for under 40 tons. That's historical, at least, which is what I'm trying to follow. So humans and airplanes, no. So that's pretty much it. Like, there's no contracts that will actually allow me to progress, unfortunately, unless I grind sounding rockets, which I totally could. So in hindsight, I'd probably set my contract payout maybe 10% higher or something like that, just so I'd have a little bit more cash here, because I need to upgrade this or I can't do anything. So alright, so I commit to upgrading this, and even then it's going to take a year, but okay, I can wait. Now I've got like no cash, so okay, let's just kind of proceed with this experiment. So do a contract, so that gives me a little bit of advance cash, so I'd have to build that. So now this cash has to pay for, so I'm going to get, let's say, 2,500 by completing that contract. So I'm going to have 2,500 cash coming to me, and let's see what craft I could use to do that. So that leaves me, pretty much broke, but I will be building the things that I need. So it's a pretty marginal situation here. So let's see. That's probably not the cheapest. Let's see. So I'm pretty confident that this rocket would be able to complete that contract. So it's going to cost me a pretty substantial amount of what I'm going to get back, and like half of the cash I have on hand now to build. But I could definitely do that. So using this, to complete sounding rocket contracts, or doing a little bit of, kind of optimizations or tweaking, to try to make kind of the cheapest sounding rocket I could with the hardware that I have unlocked, is a path I could go down. But personally, like, even if I find that interesting, like if I'm willing to, come home and do 1 or 2 of those a day, just grind cash for a little bit, that just, again, does not make a very interesting series in my opinion. And it doesn't kind of progress the concept of kind of covering the American launchers. You would get bored just as I would after, grinding out 10 to 30 sounding rocket contracts. So let's take a look at what we actually need for cash to progress. So I want to make the Thor rocket. So see, we're stuck to 40 tons. So I want to make the Thor rocket, and to do that I need this engine. So you can see powered the Jupiter, Thor, Thor Delta, etc. So the first config of this, I did a ton of research on this because I had to make sure the entry costs were right. So entry costs are here. It says what's it going to cost for me to research this engine to be able to even use them. So it's the same engine as this one. So see how those costs are the same, 13,000, 13,000. They're related to these engines, the LR89s. And see, those are just slightly more expensive, 15,000. So that's the FASA version. It's the stock version. And then there's the sustainer for the Atlas engine, for the LR105. So a little cheaper engine. And so there's the FASA one here, which kind of has a tank butt full of kerosene, I believe, and the kind of stock reconfigured one. So they're kind of all kind of a family of engines, and so I've got the stock ones and the FASA ones. So the problem is I wanted to use the FASA version rather than this kind of cloned version, but when I used that, unlocking one version of something where it looks identical should give me this one for free, and for everything else it did. So if I paid for this one, I'd get this for free, same with this pair, and also because they're kind of a family, if I research these, then if I research one of these, then these should be a little cheaper. And there's a kind of a file called, what is it, entry costs, entry cost modifiers .cfg. It's part of RP-0, and so we use it to relate these families of rocket engines, which are actually related. So kind of there's cooperative research. If you've researched one, it's a lot easier to complete the research for the other one. Whereas if by the same token, if you just skip a generation of rockets which led to a later generation, well, it's going to be a lot more difficult, therefore expensive, to unlock them. So I just needed to fix the file because this one wasn't relating. So anyway, that's what took me a bit of time in the background. And oh man, it took me it kind of killed my brain a bit, but that's okay. I figured it out, and I've fixed it now. But anyway, I need this engine. So to progress, I need this engine for Jupiter. So it's going to cost $13,000. I have nothing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat. Effectively, I need that bit of cash. I could go into the config and change what I'm getting paid back for contracts to make grinding contracts possible for me, or make it plausible. If I only had to do 5 to 10 sounding rockets, I think that would be relatively reasonable. But in this case, where it's going to be 30, I can't. I'm not going to do that. So let's take a look. We've got these. Got those unlocking. All right. So I'm going to tell you how to cheat cache. So Alt F12. I'm holding Alt, and I hit F12 to open the debug toolbar here, and I'm continuing to hold Alt. And if you do that, it gives you this menu. So I want was it $20,000 or $30,000? Let's just go with 30,000. All right, so 1, 2, 3. There we go. So that's really all the additional cash that I needed, that I need to progress. So all right. So now, so that I actually do something of interest in this video, let me quickly put together a sounding rocket based on that Thor engine. So Thor, let me see. So Thor Able is kind of the rocket that I want to build. But with Thor, I can kind of do, I can progress. I can complete some more sounding rocket contracts. I can do some more interesting things. But ultimately, I'm going to want this engine as well, the AJ Upper Early, which has a number of configs. But the first, so the Thor Able 1 used the AJ 1042. So it uses this as an upper engine. Think of it like the engine we were previously using. We were using this Aerobee, the Whack Corporal. We're using that as our upper stage engine. So then we're going to be progressing to this engine. I know, so these core engines are pretty expensive. They're quite expensive to get to. But once you unlock one of them, the other ones become a bit cheaper. All right, so let's see. I'm going to keep that. Oh, no. I suppose I do want to keep the decoupler, don't I? Yeah. All right, so I'm going to kind of set it up as a basic sounding rocket because I did a quick experiment before and I was able to, I'm probably not going to want the same diameter of tank. Let me go take a quick look. I was able to get just kind of the Thor, because, so I've paid, I've invested so I can get the launch pad that will let me get larger than 40 tons, but I don't have it yet, so I still need to stay under 40 tons of rocket. So let me just look at the historical value here. So the Thor diameter was 2.44 tons according to B numbers. It's B14643.de. It's a German site, but it translates just fine online. So yeah, it's a bigger diameter than this previous rocket was. I kind of like that cone, but I don't really need it. Ultimately, also it's expensive. If I don't need precision control of my upper stage, I don't really need that. So let's make this a cone shape. Bottom. But yeah, if I was going to try doing this career again, I'll have to consult with Nathan Kell because he believes it's possible to, it's possible to complete the career without too much terrible trouble with the difficulty settings as I have them now. But at least as I find it, either it's going to force me to do things I really don't care to do or I'm not interested to do, like making airplanes, or like I would have been restricted along a very narrow path of kind of options, which also isn't very fun or interesting. So I'll have to ask him kind of what, where I might have kind of went wrong compared to what his initial concept was for what you should do in order to kind of get through this wall in career mode. Like, how do you go from putting your first craft into orbit to those later contracts, like the lunar contracts, re-entry manned. All right, so I'm going to need this engine, so I'm going to invest 13,000 in that. There we go. And I've at this point I may have already I made some kind of side videos where I showed I was showing off Raider Nick's version of the Thor Able rocket, which is a beautiful rocket, just not currently placed in RP-0 right now. Also, it's because of the beautiful models he makes, it takes up a ton of memory, so I can't fit it here. But as as everything transitions to KSP 1.1, we absolutely want to place his hardware. And in fact, one of the reasons I'm doing this playthrough is so I can figure out what does a Thor stage cost if I make it from procedural tank and the engines as we have them priced now, so I can kind of figure out what prices should the parts in his pack have, because we obviously know where they should go since we already have this placed, and we know the tank for Thor should be available at the same time as the engine for Thor, things like that. So this playthrough will help me to make notes of for all the things I need to place the beautiful models that Raider Nick has made for the Thor Able and other rockets. So let me fill this with, so we just have this first config here. So I'm going to make a procedural version of a Thor stage, just under 40 tons though, because looking at the B numbers values here, the Thor liftoff weight of just that stage is 48.6 tons. So it's above the mass limit here, but that's okay. I can make a sounding rocket version of it that's just a bit lighter. Oh, and I definitely don't like that curvature of tank. Let's see, shape, smooth cone. I just like that shape way better. And the bottom should be, what, 2.4? I believe that's what it is. Yeah, there we go. So I just need to make it so, oh right, I remember when I was doing a little experimentation, I just ended up making it a bit narrower, the sounding rocket version of it. Let's make it a little shorter. Oh yeah, I remember it being 10 tons, or I mean 10 meters long, that tank. So there we go. Nice, perfect. So about the same. There we go. So I'm not going to put fins or anything. It's just going to be a really, really basic sounding rocket version, where we're just, that doesn't that doesn't look good. That doesn't work. There we go. So it's just going to give us a bit of experience with this rocket. So there's another thing I want to show off. So it's it's a pretty ugly rocket in my opinion. I still need to do a little digging for more textures. See if I can find something that looks a bit nicer for these craft. I like the Titan stripes because they're more detailed, but also it isn't quite right for this design. German? It's really the same. Now I have to go all the way back around. There we go. So yeah, it's a really ugly rocket, but that's kind of one of the downsides of using procedural tanks. If, like me, you're not an artist, you're not good at searching for other people's textures as well. So I just need to do a quick check. So the engine burn time, did I note it down somewhere? Let me see. Yeah, 2.75 minutes, and you can see that here. Where are you? 13.9, okay, this version. So 165 seconds, so this, because obviously I made it smaller than the real stage, it's going to be within the rated burn time, so it's going to be just fine. One thing I do want to give it, though, is, oh yeah, right, now I remember, I made it 2.1, diameter 2.1, so I'm going to make this a little longer, maybe slightly less long than that, because I need to stick in an avionics unit so I can control it. So, ooh, those are expensive. Let's see, whoa, example, oh, I see, sorry, it's showing me the KOS numbers, which gobbledygook to me. So, okay, okay, I'll put that on top. I used the two in kind of my quick test. I used the, okay, I'm gonna, so if I design it creatively, let's say I divided up this cone, so there was a spot where it was a 1 meter radius, I could throw this in, but here's my quick and dirty way to put avionics units into things. So look at that gross gap, offset, and I'm just going to offset this tank to cover up the avionics unit. In practice, a lot of the tanks I was using have avionics built into them, so you don't have to hide them that way, because it is known what abilities they have. The Mercury Redstone, it had, did this and that, and so we've included the mass and cost and such of the avionics in many of those prefab tanks. But yeah, so this is going to be a pretty decent looking sounding rocket. And in the next, so I could have, should have, would have done a little pre-planning. Okay, obviously I need to change the name of this. Let's see. So let's see, Thor sounding rocket 1. And let me change that in the kind of the detailed description, because that's from actually the previous craft I was using, looking at. Won't be able to spin it up. Yeah, this rocket, it's an interesting one. It won't have roll control. And did I fill? Okay, I did fill both tanks. Okay, it won't have roll control because it just has the single engine, so I won't be able to spin up that top stage. That means. So I'll do a little experimentation to make sure that's okay, that functions, or else I might have to do something like research. These, which are vernier thrusters, which give you it's a small amount of thrust that's offset from the center, which allows you to produce roll with the craft. So I'll investigate that. And there's another cool technique, another cool trick that I want to show off, but this video is already getting a bit long, kind of with me explaining / making excuses for cheating a little bit of cash. So I wish I'd set the difficulty better, more fit for what I'm doing earlier, but I didn't, so that's how I get around it. So you see this engine here, so it shows you what data it has. Notice current reliability and max, there's a really big difference there, 45 minute versus 183. So roughly you make it 3 times as reliable by researching it, and right now it's just a fresh, untested engine. So the test flight includes this option called R&D, where you could pay to increase. So Agathorn has made a nice display here, so for $100 per day, 100 funds a day, you'd get 100 data, which isn't bad. Like, it's actually a pretty good balance. I found I was comparing it to if I just flew this as a sounding rocket. So when I fly this as a sounding rocket, I'm going to get about 500 data. So by this system would have cost me about 500 credits, which is about half the price of what it's going to cost to fly this. but in flying this, I'm going to make a bit of money from the contract. So it's a really excellent alternative to grinding out sounding rockets if you're just doing sounding rockets to improve the efficiency, or I guess the reliability, increase your experience with an engine. So I think that's a really good balance as it is actually. Although that might be obviously adjusted for other parts. Bigger engines like the F1 should cost more to increase its reliability, etc. But that's a pretty good starting point for this engine. So actually I was able to show that off a bit quicker than I thought it would take. I thought I would just briefly mention that this R&D exists, but if I created it, if I hired a team, which I don't want to because I'm already cash strapped, so I'd hire a team and I could see those out in the test flight window, out on the KSC campus. And that would be another way to increase the reliability of your engines, which is great. If you had a bit of extra cash, there were engines you were unlocking and you wanted to use, they're just not reliable enough yet. Rather than flying many uncrewed missions or kind of cheap sounding rocket missions, you just create a team and they'll be able to research it. I don't think they can research it to maximum effectiveness. Like let's say 10,000 is the maximum data you can get for an engine. Maybe you could only go to 7,000. I believe that's configurable with the engines kind of on the back end. But that's a really, really excellent mechanic to go with test flight. But anyway, I've built this. I'm going to fly it in the next video, I believe. But yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoy as we move forward here, and we'll do a sounding rocket test or two with this, and then I'll in a bit I'll be able to create actual rockets more than 40 tons. So a video from two from now, that's where we'll be. So thanks for watching. Goodbye.